perhaps the main reason reform of the Northern Ireland Protocol was so essential was to get the Northern Irish Assembly at Stormont up and running. As it's currently standing, the Democratic Unionist Party is boycotting the Assembly in protest against the Protocol. Today it emerged that the DUP will be voting against the government's Windsor framework, which in turn means the boycott of the devolved Assembly will remain. So the Prime Minister's plan, in effect, fails to fulfil its primary purpose. How long can Northern Ireland operate on a direct rule basis? Well, to discuss this with me, I'm delighted to be joined by Baroness Hoey. Kate, I said earlier that Stephen Pound was my favourite socialist. You always were until you actually left the Labour Party and now sit as an independent peer, but always with a strong interest in the Union. How do you think things can go ahead with the DUP unwilling to go back into the Assembly?
Well, we saw really from the very beginning when the Windsor Framework, I hate using the word Windsor, I call it the Framework Agreement, came out, that there were 7 tests that DUP had set. And right at the beginning, I think it was pretty clear that none of the 7 tests had been met. But they did say they would take time. And we got one legal view from the former Attorney General in Northern Ireland on specifically on the Act of Union bit. And I think tomorrow we're getting more legal opinions from the European Research Group lawyers. Clearly, none of the 7 tests, in my view, have been met. So the DUP today have said that they couldn't possibly vote for the statutory instrument. And this is very interesting because it's only coming as one specific aspect of the agreement, and that is the Stormont Lock. But I think the Prime Minister has very clearly said that, Downing Street have said that it may only be the Stormont Lock, but they're taking it as being a vote for or against the whole of the new agreement. So the DUP will be voting against. I think they're under huge pressure. There's no doubt about it from everyone.
And from the TUV, so they've got people who are putting pressure on them, another Northern Ireland party that wants the DUP to be very robust, and if they're not, they're worried about losing votes to the TUV.
Well, yes, but I was actually, the TUV came out very clearly at the beginning, they were against it, but they're under a huge pressure from the establishment in Northern Ireland, from the Northern Ireland office, from the Americans, from the Irish government, from many people within the Conservative Party, and of course the Labour Party has come out in favour of the Windsor Agreement without even having read it. And then when they read it, I think they're automatically going to vote for it on Wednesday.
So it will get through Parliament on Wednesday, but we'll still not have a devolved
and we've
Assembly.
Always said, and I did many of the campaign anti-protocol rallies in Northern Ireland, you can't have both. You can't have the protocol and you can't have devolution together. Government has to decide. Now, it looks like Rishi Sunak has decided that he doesn't really want to preserve the union, because what this is doing, the protocol did none of the changes, a little bit of tinkering, but none of the changes have changed the fundamental issue, which is Northern Ireland is being set apart from the rest of the United Kingdom. And Jacob, we had one ballot paper, the United Kingdom to leave.
So let's take Green Lane. If you go abroad and come back into the UK and you go through the Green Lane at customs, how many forms do you have to fill out?
None.
If you use the Green Lane to send goods to Northern Ireland, how many entries do you have to make on a piece of paper?
Well, they've made a great thing that it's fewer, but it's still going to be 21. Plus, of course, even things like taking your pet, you're still going to have to fill in a form and say you're not going to take it on into the Republic of Ireland. I asked questions: how are they going to? How are they going to kind of follow the dog, right across? It's just ridiculous. And I'm afraid that the Prime Minister, very stupidly, I have to say, sold it to people as if this was the absolutely wonderful, it had changed everything, and hadn't.
Well, the thing that worries me is that the vote, as you said, is being set on the whole protocol rather than on the individual item, because it seems to me the individual statutory instrument, a break being introduced, is better than what previously existed. It's better to have a break, even if it's very hard to use, than no break at all. But that if it's about the whole protocol, then you may have to be at least giving a degree of approval to something you don't actually like.
Yes, and that's why I genuinely hope that any Member of Parliament who calls themselves a Conservative and Unionist Member of Parliament couldn't possibly vote for it on Wednesday. Now, I understand, elections coming up, parties want to be united, but this is, it's going to go through because of the Labour vote. Surely this is an opportunity for members of Parliament of the Conservative Party to really show that they're prepared to actually stand up for the union. They don't get many chances to actually vote that means that. And I think that will actually go down very well with those 17.5 million people who thought that Brexit was done. And it isn't going to be done. It's not going to be done. This might, Rishi Sunak might think this is sort of putting things off for a little bit and it's going to help. It's not going to bring back devolution.
Because all the changes in the framework are being made in European law.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we diverge in GB, they could then change their law so we couldn't send goods freely to Northern Ireland.
Well, and this is what I think more of Conservative MPs are beginning to realise, that this doesn't just affect Northern Ireland. This is actually really bringing in a very subtle way. I mean, the EU officials are very, very clever, and they seem to out-clever our officials. And it's actually bringing the whole of the United Kingdom, the rest of that's not in the protocol, much, much closer to the European Union, which of course is what many, many people, particularly in the Labour Party, have wanted to see. So this is, a really important vote. And even if it's lost, it's not the end of the matter, and devolution will not be back. And I think the government is going to have to look at a form of going back to some kind of direct rule, which is, frankly, I said it many times, people aren't waking up in the morning in Northern Ireland saying, please bring back our assembly, we're missing it.
The tentacles of the EU may get back across the Irish Sea from Northern Ireland to GB. But thank you, Kate.